Okay, so this one's an episode I've been wanting to do for a long time. I'll be upfront with you. It's a topic, as you know, really gets under my skin. I'm going to try to be positive here. Today we're going to count down my all-time top 5 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame snubs. Bands and artists who are well overdue for the so-called honor, but routinely get passed up year after year. We're also going to try to figure out why the Rock Hall routinely refuses to induct actual rock artists into their ranks. Call the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but they seem to have a bias against rock and roll. They seem to hate rock and roll. I'm not going to pull any punches here. I just want to give some love to some classic rock icons that I think we all admire, and I want to hear yours too. It's all coming up next on Professor of Rock. Hey, music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you remember those cool Choose Your Own Adventure books from childhood, you're going to dig this channel of straight nostalgia. Actually, I just ordered a Stranger Things one for my kids the other day. It's pretty cool. Make sure to click the bell below and subscribe so that you always know when our interviews are coming out. We have some amazing interviews coming out. I've done quite a few in the last few weeks and have a lot coming up. And also check us out on Patreon and our merch. Both of these things help us keep it a daily channel and keep the interviews flowing. So billed as rock's highest honor, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame touts their inductees as the people who shaped the history of rock and roll. And you know what? I think there are a lot of artists in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame who absolutely deserve that honored designation. But then again, there are some who don't as well, and I'm not going to get into that. I mean, there are so many inclusions as well as exclusions that just make me scratch my head. Anyway, I just got into some of that recently with a live stream I did about this year's class of inductees, who I voted for. I asked you who you voted for. If you haven't seen it, you can check it out after this. I'll link to it. But for this episode, I want to give you my top 5 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame snubs of all time, and I want to hear yours. 5 acts that without a doubt should be in, and they've been passed over time and again. So the rules for getting inducted are simple, I guess, though not easy to accomplish. According to the Rock Hall's website, inductees are recognized for having contributed over 25 years of musical excellence. And you know what? It's actually kind of vague, but at the same time, it's also pretty telling for what it doesn't say, which is that inductees are recognized for contributing over 25 years of rock and roll excellence. That's a pretty important distinction, wouldn't you say? You would think that an institution that calls themselves the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame would actually prioritize inducting rock and roll acts into their ranks. But instead, definitely over the last 10 years, they seem to have created this open-ended list of genres, and they seem to be more focused on being politically correct than inducting based upon merit, influence, and longevity. I'm not going to open up that can of worms. I'm simply going to offer 5 acts that should be in, some honorable mentions. I mean, if you're just going to let any genre into your ranks, that you want, then you're not really the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. You either got to change your name to something like the Music Hall of Fame or Pop Hall of Fame. I mean, if you're called the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, then, act like it. Also, don't have an actual fan vote and pretend like fans can vote on their favorite acts if you have no integrity to honor that vote, the vote of the people. Just my 2 cents. That's why I'm wearing this shirt right here. Number 1 vote getter, didn't get in. I mean, maybe you get the point here. Maybe I'm going too off board here, off base, whatever. Let's get into it. Today I'm making the case for my top 5 snubs. Let's start off with number 5. This is a band that actually had more hits than about 3/4 of those already in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I've interviewed them a couple times the last few months, talking about Foreigner. This one is so overdue. I mean, the killer combination of Mick Jones and Lou Gramm has gifted the world various standards in the rock canon. Various. This partnership was at least inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame in 2013. They get it. But let's be honest, their omission from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, it's downright ridiculous. As the impetus of Foreigner, they grew into one of the most prolific tandems of the rock era. From 1977 to 1995, Mick, Lou, and Foreigner placed 22 songs in the Hot 100. 16 of those went to the top 40. 9 went to the top 10. Even songs that didn't score as high on the Hot 100 are still classic rock standards. But ultimately, more important than that, their status then, these songs, a lot of them are still heard in pop culture every single day. Longevity, it matters, my friends. Foreigner has 5 top 5 studio albums to their name, all of which have gone multi-platinum in the US, plus their 1982 compilation records. It sold over 7 million copies in the US. Foreigner sold over 80 million albums worldwide. That's a remarkable and rare achievement in and of itself. But I gotta come back to Lou Gramm. Even taking all of these other achievements out of the equation, you would think that Foreigner would get Hall of Fame nod on the merits of Lou Gramm's incomparable voice alone, one of the best of his time, if not the best. It's amazing. It's quite simply one of the greatest rock singers in history. Mick Jones is not only one of our greatest song crafters, this man is an incredible producer. He's produced huge records for legends, from 5150 Van Halen to Stormfront for Billy Joel. Really, this is a no-brainer. The Rock Hall ought to be ashamed that they haven't inducted this overqualified band into their ranks. Their first ballot, as far as I'm concerned. Now, coming in at number 4, I've got a rock singer that some of the greatest singers ever say is the greatest singer ever. Talking about Paul Rodgers in all of his iterations. Free, Bad Company, The Firm, The Law, solo stuff, everything. Paul Rodgers, what can you say? He's been around the block. He was such a dynamic lead vocalist for Free, and he's kept it coming strong with every band that he's been part of, including his collaboration with Queen in the 2000s. The man is a legend's legend, but you don't have to take my word for it. Like I said, that's the opinion of luminaries like Freddie Mercury, Ann Wilson, Robert Plant, John Mellencamp, and the aforementioned Lou Gramm. You know that their opinions carry a lot more weight than mine. All of them have named Paul Rodgers not only as one of the greatest, but their all-time favorite vocalists. That's Freddie Mercury's favorite vocalist. That's Ann Wilson's favorite vocalist. In fact, he's so admired by his peers that several of the biggest classic rock bands in history have asked Paul to be their lead singer. I'm talking about Deep Purple, Journey, and even The Doors. They tried to recruit him after Jim Morrison died. I mean, when Brian May and Roger Taylor decided to tour again as Queen, they wanted to recruit a vocalist that the late Freddie Mercury would have approved of, he would have been proud of. One that could do justice to his legacy and honor the music of the band. So, of course, they chose Paul Rodgers. Paul's versatility, his power, his range, his passion, they just put him in a league of his own. He can rivet a smoky honky-tonk with his bluesy soulfulness or blast over a stadium with his mighty rock bravado. His time with Free, he gave us the iconic hit All Right Now, one of the greatest ever. Bad Company, he turned in 4 U.S. top 5 albums, one of which went to number 1, 1974's Bad Company. And he gave us legit classics like Can't Get Enough, Rock and Roll Fantasy, and of course, their self-titled track, Bad Company. I can't get enough of your love, no I can't. I'm my rock and roll fantasy. Bad Company, and I can't deny. I mean, come on. In The Firm, he garnered 2 number 1 U.S. rock hits, Radioactive and All the King's Horses. Turn me on tonight. And all the King's Horses. In The Law, he collaborated with some big-name artists, including Def Leppard's Phil Collen, for an early version of Miss You in a Heartbeat. And then there's his solo material and more collaborations. I mean, this man has been around and he's just about done it all. An incredible resume, incredible. Unfortunately, you have to wonder if the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has bothered to look at one of the greatest all-time resumes of rock and roll. As we get into number 3, I want to thank our sponsor, Zenni Eyewear. If you're in the market for high-quality, customizable frames for the lowest prices out there, click on the info button right up here to get the Professor of Rock deal with Zenni. They'll deliver them right to your door. Check it out. Up to 80% off. Okay, coming in at number 3, Up the Irons, baby. It's my top vote within the Rock Class of 2023 nominations. Iron Maiden, the pioneers of the new wave of British heavy metal. I mean, they finally put in Judas Priest last year, so I thought, maybe this year Maiden had a shot. But no. Even though they were the 4th leading vote getter among fans, they were once again snubbed. It's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, there's a band that has sold over 130 million albums. 130 million as a metal band. What do you have to do to get the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame's attention? 130 million albums, that's better than Britney Spears, come on now. In the UK, they have 15 top 10 studio albums, and 5 of those went to number 1. Then another 5 went to number 2. Oh, and of the albums that missed the top 10, there were only 2, and those went to number 12 and number 16. They didn't miss by much. This band has not ceased to absolutely kill it on the UK charts in every decade, from the 80s to now. Add to that a slew of successful singles, including live cuts and reissues. They've scored 17 top 10 hits. And the US, 11 of their albums have gone top 20. 3 have reached the top 5, and they're classics. I have to say, Bruce Dickinson is one of the most interesting and dynamic frontmen ever. After Iron Maiden's first lead singer left due to substance abuse, Dickinson came into the fold with a fury. After playing some shows to introduce fans to their new direction, Iron Maiden released what may be their masterpiece, The Number of the Beast, an album that has sold over 20 million records. It was their first number 1 album in the UK and made major inroads on the US charts, where it hit number 33. This is when they were really an underground band. Run to the Hills, Number of the Beast from that album, phenomenal.
Run to the hills, 666, the number of the beast.
But obviously the sheer musical brilliance doesn't stop just there. Whether on Number of the Beast or any one of their endless catalog of records, Iron Maiden has been relentless in their pursuit of sonic excellence. Let me share a quote that I think really sums it up. Iron Maiden are an institution. Over the course of 46 years, they have come to embody a spirit of fearless creative independence, ferocious dedication to their fans, and a cheerful indifference to their critics that's won them a following that spans every culture, generation, and time zone. A story of gritty determination and courageous defiance of the naysayers. Theirs has been an adventure like no other. Yeah, you got that right. This band is an institution, more so than the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame can ever claim to be. Iron Maiden has created a monumental musical legacy that will last centuries. Centuries. In at number 2, I've got Boston. Again, one of the most underappreciated bands of the rock era. I mean, that seems to be an ongoing theme with all these selections. That's kind of what rock and roll is all about. But really, they should have been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame a long time ago. This one was hard to put to number 2 instead of number 1 because I feel like it's just the mother of all snubs. I say that because they basically saved rock and roll when it was floundering in the mid-70s. From their debut album alone. Even if they had never done anything ever again in music after that debut album, it's enough to get them in my opinion. Let's go back to the mid-70s. In the industry, rock and roll had taken a backseat to disco, mellow pop, and singer-songwriter fare. I'm not saying anything bad about these genres. I enjoy them. But where would we be without pure, unadulterated rock? Well, Boston and their 17 million selling debut album changed all of that. They blew up radio. They sent a shockwave through the industry, selling out shows virtually everywhere. Man, people were starving for what Boston brought to the table. Powerful riffs? Yes. Multi-layered vocal extravaganzas and harmonized guitar leads. It was just what rock enthusiasts needed to temper the effects of disco and infuse a much-needed life back into the waning genre of rock. It was a rock and roll miracle. Just from their debut, you got rock standards like More Than a Feeling, Peace of Mind, Long Time, Hitch a Ride, and Smoke, and just to name a few. Of the album, Tom Scholz said, everybody thought it was impossible because disco ruled the airways at the time, but we stumbled onto a sound that worked. Soon everybody was imitating it. Yeah, everybody imitated, and we're so glad they did. Over the course of their career, Boston would release 4 top 10 albums. Walk On at number 7, Boston at number 3, Don't Look Back and Third Stage, both at number 1. Third Stage came out 9 years after they had a record, and it still hit number 1. According to Sony Music, Boston sold over 50 million albums worldwide, including 32 million in the US alone. And after their debut, they continued to reel off more Hot 100 classic rock standards. Don't Look Back, Cool the Engines, We're Ready, I Need Your Love, and of course, the number 1 hit, Amanda. So what am I missing here? Or maybe I should say, what is the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame missing here? It just doesn't make any sense. I got to do some honorable mentions before we get to that number 1. Here they are. You knew it was coming. But really, how can anyone narrow down the Rock Hall's incompetence to just 5 snubs? Very difficult. So my first honorable mention goes to Motley Crue. These guys have 6 US top 10 studio albums to their name, 3 top 10 compilation albums as well. Iconic songs like Girls, 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 Dr. Feelgood, Kickstart My Heart, Wild Side, Without You, Shout at the Devil. Add to that their iconic 1985 power ballad, Home Sweet Home, whose music video it basically broke MTV. And this band, they're just a no-brainer, but my understanding is that they've been banned. My next honorable mention that gets left out of a lot of these conversations, surprisingly, is In Excess. The 80s just wouldn't be the same without the indelible music of In Excess. Singer Michael Hutchence and multi-instrumentalist Andrew Ferris had such a unique writing chemistry. The two wrote an incredible catalog of essential 80s and 90s rock hits from Need You Tonight to New Sensation, Suicide Blonde, What You Need, Never Tear Us Apart. The list goes on and on and on. Of Michael Hutchence, Ray Manzarek of The Doors once said that he was the closest thing he'd seen to Jim Morrison. That's not an endorsement that can get the Rock Hall's attention. I just don't know it will. I just don't. I also have to say that Toto is another one. Easy choice here. I've touted them a lot in the past, but Eddie Van Halen once said, technically, they're the greatest collection of musicians in one band ever. Finally, for my last honorable mention, I'm going with The Replacements. Although they didn't deal in chart hits, what they did deal in was great music that inspired a long list of alternative bands and indie artists that followed in their footsteps. Paul Westerberg, one of the greatest. They created a catalog of rock staples that predated so-called alternative music and grunge by almost a decade. How can you put Nirvana in on the first ballot and not have Paul Westerberg and his band of misfits in already? It doesn't make any sense. They played a monumental role in inspiring Mr. Cobain. He said so himself. Okay, so we've made it all the way to number 1, the number 1 snub. And in my top spot, since it is my list, I do want to see yours below. I'm going with the Fatal Four, otherwise known as the Smiths, my favorite band of all time. I figured I'd get that disclaimer out of the way up front. So, of course, there is bias here. When it comes to Morrissey, Johnny Marr, Andy Rourke, and Mike Joyce, it's very personal for me. They created the songs that saved my life. I know a lot of you feel the same. I'm making no apologies here, though. Just a case for why I think they're the number 1 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame omission. The Smiths, like very few artists before them, they never had one misstep. You think about their output from 1983 to 1987. In a little under 5 years, they created 4 perfect studio albums. And when I say perfect, I'm not being overdramatic. They are perfect albums. From their self-titled debut to Meet His Murder, The Queen is Dead, and Strange Ways Here We Come, what you have is a collection of flawless works, now half full of hollow as well, though it wasn't US released and had, They're like the James Dean of rock and roll, live fast, die young, and have a beautiful legacy. I'm still convinced they would have been one of the biggest bands of all time had they had the notoriety and the label push in the US. But every single one of these albums are watershed records. All of them went to number 1 on the UK indie album charts and number 2 on the mainstream UK charts, except for Meet His Murder, which went to number 1 there as well. Add to that a couple more chart-topping compilations in the live album. You're talking about 7 chart-topping records in the 80s and a number 2 record as well. Just to prove that they're still human. I mean, not to mention the many singles that weren't even on the studio albums. Panic, or Ask, or Sheila Take a Bow. How Soon Is Now? So many more.
I won't say no, how could I? Sheila, take a bow. Human and I need to belong.
14 UK indie chart number 1s, plus 2 number 2s, and a number 3 in the space of just 4 years. Are you kidding me? I mean, talk about owning your niche. They dominated it. They pretty much wrote the book. I mean, the only comparable band that released that much phenomenal material in such a short period of time to me are the Beatles. And I'll argue that one till the cows come home. Maz and Mar's songs, they're just melancholy masterpieces. They often convey the innermost longing for human connection. Life is very long when you're lonely, indeed. Morrissey's lyrics have always spoken plainly to the loneliest people in the room. His words are rooted in the deepest struggles of the human condition. They somehow gave us hope and faith that there was someone out there who knew exactly how we felt. Morrissey could communicate lyrically in a way that maybe only 1 or 2 other singers or writers have ever done, or will ever do. In my mind, it's an indisputable fact that Morrissey is the greatest lyricist in music history. Take it to the bank. That's my opinion. Then there's Johnny Marr. I mean, he's written songs in chords that most guitarists have never even dreamed of. I don't get how it gets any more obvious than this. So that's my list of the most glaring Rock and Roll Hall of Fame snubs. And now that I have that out of my system, I'm going to shut up about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for a while. At least until they screw it up again next year. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Leave us a comment about the so-called Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Give us your top 5 or top 10 snubs. Which bands have been passed over that you think are most deserving and why? Do they need to change the name of it? Do we need a new Hall of Fame? A People's Hall of Fame is what I say. Now, if you dig our content, subscribe below. Love to have you. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends, for sure.